All right, in the last video, we wrapped up talking about the market failure of macroeconomic instability. The idea that market capitalism could potentially create a business cycle, periods of expansion that lead to periods of contraction and depression, rather than stability. If this is true, then it suggests that government intervention, a non-market entity, could assist. But not everybody agrees that it's true. We learned that the classical economists believed the markets work, and there was no reason to think that the business cycle would be a problem. Instead, they tended to ascribe to the notion that it is government interference, or even things that are natural, like weather conditions, hurricanes, earthquakes, tornadoes, that might disrupt an economy and cause a severe contraction. But nothing inherently in the market itself would create instability. That changed under Keynes. John Maynard Keynes came along and said, no, the market is unstable. The axioms that the classicals contended, such as a rational person and price flexibility and competitive markets, that's not accurate in his eyes. And so he brought forth the idea of policy activism, using government as an attenuator of economic fluctuations. And that's what we have long since debated. Economists even today question whether the market or policy activism through government is the best way to stabilize an economy. We also learned that despite Keynes' influence after the Great Depression, there was a neoclassical resurgence that emerged in the late 70s and early 80s under Milton Friedman and Robert Lucas. They accepted the same tenets that the classical economists did. They rejected policy activism. They rejected fiscal and monetary policy, and instead focused on creating economic stability through mostly market forces. A lot of what we've done so far in our analysis of capitalism has been scientific, objective analysis, looking at the way the system works, what it does well, what it doesn't do so well. And for the most part, people can look at this and agree, regardless of whether they like capitalism or not. When we get to the normative assessment, the subjective assessment of capitalism, it becomes more contentious. And it's like looking through two different windows. The heirs of Karl Marx and Thomas Hobbes, the window they look through, capitalism is dark. It's not pretty. It involves market exploitation and the market distribution of income and wealth. Today's Democrats, progressives, socialists, and the likes often take their lead from this perspective. It doesn't mean they all agree. Most Democrats in the US and progressives favor capitalism over socialism, but they do see and agree on the potential for exploitation and unfair outcomes in the distribution of income. And that's enough to justify for them a larger government, using that non-market agent to correct the inequities of the free market. In contrast, the heirs of John Locke and Adam Smith, they look through a window that makes capitalism much brighter. Their concern is with the state, who may act as an agent of political exploitation and political redistribution of income and wealth. Today's Republicans, libertarians, and anarcho-capitalists tend to align with this view. Notice that all parties are concerned with exploitation. It's a matter of, is it coming from the state or is it coming from the market? They're all concerned about the distribution of income and wealth, but is it a distribution based on political insiders, or is it a distribution based on market forces? That debate will be ongoing indefinitely, but at least we can understand how different parties perceive capitalism. Let's wrap up with the relative performance of capitalism. In terms of efficiency, pretty high. The consumer choice and the profit motive lead productive endeavors to be undertaken and unproductive ones to be rejected. Remember, as long as a consumer values something at more than it costs to make, there's a potential profit. So there's an incentive for an entrepreneur to go and create that good. Monopolies, externalities, and limited public good production reduce overall efficiency and need to be dealt with through government or complementary market forces. Even the most ardent supporters of capitalism recognize that there may be some limitations, and in those instances, government may be a rectifying force. Stability. There's still a lot of debate on this one. The classical economists, Milton Friedman, Robert Lucas, all believe that capitalist systems are inherently stable, and therefore there is a minimal role for government. No policy activism necessary. Whereas John Maynard Keynes saw the capitalist system as unstable, and so a larger role for government. Policy activism in the form of fiscal and monetary policies. In regards to the income distribution, we know it is unequal, but it's often touted as fair in opportunity, but unfair in outcome. Opportunity and outcome is the great debate. Should we have equal outcomes where everybody gets the same slice of the pie? Or should we have equal opportunity where everybody has the same opportunity to reach their potential without government intervention? And that's important because when you hear fair in opportunity, it doesn't mean everybody will have the same abilities to generate income. Somebody that is very talented will generate more income in a market system than somebody that is not talented. But both individuals will not be interfered upon by government. So it's fair in opportunity. That's what that means. But the assessment is still subjective and not something that can be agreed upon through science. Economic growth in a capitalist system tends to be high. And this is a result of the incentives that make up the system. Remember, there are material rewards in capitalism. If you work hard, if you save money and open a business, if you come up with a new technology, if you go to school and get an education, you are rewarded with more income and more things. That creates an environment for economic growth. More specifically, the higher growth is coming from, or in the form of, dynamic efficiency. We're shifting that production possibilities frontier out over time, increasing our potential production, and we're seeing intensive growth, meaning that we're growing the per capita income of people. We're not just growing the whole economy, we're growing the slices of that pie as well. Ironically, capitalist systems do have lower savings and investment rates than socialist systems, on average, which is a bit perplexing. But it's not if you realize who is in charge of the savings investment decision. In capitalism, it's the individual in the marketplace. You decide how much you want to save. Whereas in socialism, the government decides, the state decides, which means socialist economies have an advantage in generating savings because they can force it. But they don't have an advantage when it comes to dynamic efficiency and intensive growth because they don't have those same material incentives leading people towards higher productivity. Okay, that wraps up the theory of capitalism. If you have any questions, let me know.